Welcome to Post Break. My name is Chris Peterson. I'm an EP at Nice Shoes and board secretary of the PNYA, and I chair the Education and Events Committee as well. Today's topic is keeping a healthy mindset in our unpredictable industry. Now, to introduce our moderator, she's a veteran of New York's post-production industry. She's a PNYA board member, and she's here now to talk about her new endeavors. Please give a warm welcome to Kim Spikes.
Thank you. And welcome to everyone today. We're going to dive into how uncertainty is affecting everyone. And I know there's been a lot of it since about 2020 at the very least, if not earlier than that. So thank you for the introduction, Chris, and thank you to the PNYA for having both of us today. I want to quickly introduce us. I'm Kim Spikes, and I worked at Post Factory, yay, from back in the day, if you were familiar or worked there, which then became Sim and then became Picture Shop. And I was there, that kind of arc, for 13 years and did a lot of different roles. And I'm a PNYA board member, as Chris said, and I co-chair the Sustainability Committee, and there will be a shameless plug on that later, so you will have an opportunity to sign up for this weekend's trash pickup. And right now, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Shawn Chrisman.
Hi, everyone. Shawn Chrisman, and pronouns are he and him. And let's see, how would I describe myself? Well, first off, a relationship and intimacy coach, a professional counselor, writer, and professor at a university nearby. So as my friends and family like to tease me about, isn't there an easier way to have interesting party conversations? But I decided to go all those directions. Yeah, Kim, why don't you tell them a little bit about Ethos?
Yeah, thanks, Shawn. So there's a QR code, so you can get tons of information if you guys want to pull out your phones and snap that. And what inspired this, I'm sure a lot of you wonder, is the past 20 years have taught me that, you know, it's all about our approach at work, and it's our mindsets, our perspectives, and our behaviors. And they really inform how we come together as a team and what we actually create. We all know that it only takes one person to throw off team dynamic and create a big imbalance in our world. And so we offer workshops like this one. We do retreats. We consult with companies of all sizes, and we bring teams together as well as provide individual and group coaching. And essentially, it provides self-awareness to people. They can find potential blind spots. A lot of people are unaware of things that they're doing that affect others. You can help individuals and teams to communicate, understand each other's work styles and how to work with others better, and also identify negative thoughts that you might have that kind of sabotage what you're doing and your relationships, and to develop and leverage all of your strengths. And this is meant to be an open discussion, so I encourage you all to talk and feel comfortable. And you can ask any questions that you want along the way. You can raise your hands. You can blurt things out. Totally fine if you interrupt either one of us, not a problem. The chat's great. And if you feel uncomfortable about asking a question, you can chat it to Chris Peterson, and then he will either kind of parking lot that till the end, or Chris, you can just anonymously, here's a question, and read it out. So feel very comfortable, whatever route you want to do, all is welcome. And to kick it off, we're going to start with, what uncertainties are you feeling now? So if you could put in the chat or just say what you feel is kind of the biggest ones that are on your radar right now. And I'm sure one that I can just throw out there is the round of new strikes that could happen this summer. I'm assuming that's probably on everybody's top 2 list.
One of the popular things with uncertainty is just inflation, economic principles, either related to industry and jobs. There's a lot of clients in my office that are talking about just what is the next few years hold for politics.
I think that's a good one. I, for myself this morning, I listened to the Supreme Court and kind of what they're going to do in Denver or in Colorado. So that was a little stressful and creating uncertainty for me.
I put in the chat with regard to those strikes, also the greater health of our industry as a whole affects all of us so deeply and directly, but at the same time, there's very little we can do about it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to continue. So we're going to do a quick poll. And what is your current stress level? And so you can put between a 1 and a 10, kind of where you're feeling right now about everything. And 10 is like the most stress. Yeah, so these are pretty, I'm seeing a lot of 7s, 8s, some 10s, more 10s, 8s. It looks like on average, we're probably around an 8. Shawn, what would you say to that, kind of seeing that number?
That's the common 7 and above is commonly what we're seeing, and the challenging part is, and we'll get more into some of the science. When we're above roughly around a 6, it's hard to engage our prefrontal cortex. It's hard to engage our higher order thinking. We typically go more into that survival mode, that fight or flight. So especially when we're at a 7 and above for a sustained amount of time, it's taking its toll on multiple facets of our health.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you had a question there in the
Oh,
chat.
yeah, there was a question. What does the film industry have in store, and how many films are going to make any money? So yes, that would be a big question. I think a lot of people have right now.
Absolutely. And so with this slide in front of us, the questions to consider. So these are often questions that we want to be thinking about, like what is our stress level and how are we relating to this period of uncertainty? How might it be impacting our relationships? We might find that we're having more relational conflict right now, like a higher level of irritability as that uncertainty continues to thread throughout our day. We might be isolating in our relationships. We might be doing that through behaviors like self-medicating or with decision making. We might be making more impulsive decisions, or we might actually feel the opposite, that we're paralyzed to make a decision to act in areas of our life. We might notice in our emotional health. So are we having disproportionate responses to activators? Are we feeling more angry, or are we feeling more emotional about things that may not have elicited that strong of a response in the past? And then how are we handling self-care? Are we, for one, doing self-care? Or are we finding sleep is impacted, nutrition? Are we doing those outlets for self-care like exercise and movement, or are those actually being impacted as well? So wanted to throw out there when we talk about our central nervous system, and if we were to visualize walking into an event. So many of us have likely had that experience where we're walking into a room or walking into an event, and there's an amount of uncertainty. What is going to be behind that door? Are we going to know other people there? Will this be a room full of fresh new faces? And what is it like when we walk into that room? And so using that metaphor, we can move into that next slide. Our central nervous system, let me pause. Therapists and coaches, we love to use lots of visualizations and metaphors. So bear with us. If you've had your own experience, you've probably run into something like this. But think of our central nervous system as an internal smoke detector. It's wonderful at letting us know when perceived threats, maybe actual, but may even more often be perceived threats, are in our vicinity or horizon. Now, the challenge is, to borrow that metaphor further, we don't know if the smoke detector is telling us, hey, there's a little bit of smoke coming from the microwave, that popcorn's burning, or the entire first floor is now in flames. And so that's one of the challenges, is we may rush into this reaction, this what is often known as the fight or flight, and it's hard to gauge what is that level of threat. But to borrow the example a moment ago of walking into that room, we will find ourselves in one of 3 states. We might walk into that room, see a friendly face, take that breath, maybe we just kind of relax a bit, smile, and that's where we might find our connected and safe, that state of social engagement, connection, feeling okay. We might also enter that second state, which is more of the fight or flight. That's where we are not seeing a friendly face, we're not seeing a familiar face. We might start to have that bit of imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? Do I belong here? And then we take action. And that action might be, I'm going to run to the restroom. I'm going to run to the bar and get a drink. I'm going to run to the buffet line. Or we might find ourselves in that shutting down place, that state of immobilization, that sort of frozen, where we're just literally locked into place. One popular way that we're seeing these days, either in the fight or flight or the shutting down mode, is we turn to our phones. We immediately pull out our phone, we start texting, typing, checking social media feeds, but we know that we're activated. Something is going on internally, and we're trying to figure out how to self-soothe or make it through that distress. I included this slide here. It's, again, we think about levels of our activation of our central nervous system. So there is this window of tolerance where we're not overwhelmed, we're not underwhelmed. This is, again, that safe and connected place that we tend to like to be. We might find ourselves in that hyper arousal, as you can see here, short-tempered, frustrated, hyper-vigilant. That's going to be that fight or flight. And then the hypo-arousal, where we might be in the immobilized, frozen, paralyzed place, losing that sense of time around it. So what we like to see from a psychological perspective is that we're hanging out in that window of tolerance as much as we can. We know that we're going to be activated in all three zones. We just want to try to stay clear out of the upper bound or the lower bound for sustained amounts of time. Because when we do find ourselves there for sustained amounts of time, it leads into these impacts that we're going to see on the next slide. So sustained impacts on mental health. Okay, that can look like restlessness, listlessness, unsettledness, anxiety, depressive type symptoms. Physical health, we know muscle tension, increased susceptibility to illness. Relational health, in conflict, our relationships tend to be impacted and suffer when we're having that sustained fight or flight or stress response. And the thing is sometimes our loved ones, our partners, our friends and such know before we do that it's having an impact. So it's how do we also be open to hearing others in our support let us know, like, how you doing? I think things are taking a toll on you. What could be happening differently? And Kim, I think you might even have a specific story around that.
Oh, I do. So there's often a disconnect between our body and our brain. And I think many of us, you can raise your hand if you can compartmentalize. I know I can, like a pro. And I did it so well that I didn't notice stress in my own life. But I was experiencing stomach aches before work in the morning. Wrote it off, probably something I ate. Then I started having them at work before big meetings, and when clients would come in, I was like, oh, it's just part of too much coffee, whatever, didn't have lunch. And then I realized that, I went to the doctor and she opened up my chart and just shut it. And after I'd done blood work and was like, how stressed are you? And I was like, that's weird. Is something wrong? And she was like, I just want to understand what's going on in your life. So top level. So I was like, okay, let's go through it. My company was acquired. I have a new position. We're building out edits and theaters. We're hiring new people and teams. We are building out a new division. And a lot of people just left. And my dad had a major stroke. And she was like, okay, and you're not stressed. And I'm like, not really. I mean, there's not really anything to see here, like I feel fine. Like my mind works. I'm showing up. I'm good. And she said she could tell because I had vitamin deficiencies. There's I think it was roughly 7 vitamins, but when they're really low, she said it's because stress is usually you're at a high level of stress for a high amount of period and your body can't absorb it. And she warned that this could become a big health problem later. This is how you get disease. And so she was like, I suggest you take up exercise, more exercise. And I couldn't quit laughing because I'm like, I am running a marathon in 4 weeks. If 26 miles in one day isn't enough exercise, then there is not enough exercise. So I just wrote it off like, well, nothing I can do about that, and kind of went on my way. My wake-up call was when I have had maybe 4 very, very tiny migraines where I get the visual, not the headache, but this weird visual. And I was on a call with my boss and we were getting a little feisty with each other about something. And all of a sudden the migraine started and happened so quick that I couldn't see. And I was just sitting at my desk like, whoa, like that's scary. And it was the first time I had a direct correlation between I am stressed right now and my body is reacting. And I realized that my doctor was right. My body was really trying to get my attention through a bunch of things that were happening. And I just was like not having it. So I, at that point, realized I needed to make change. And I learned one of the things I learned, and Shawn's going to go through a lot of really cool techniques, but one that I like that I do all the time to check in is if you rub your hand on your palm, on the top of your palm gently, and you can try it now. Typically, if you do it really gently, it's ticklish, right? It kind of, you'll have, at least that's my sensation. And you can put what yours are in the chat. When I'm stressed, like right now, giving a presentation, I can't feel it. Like I feel that I'm touching it, but it doesn't feel ticklish or the same. And so what I've learned over time is like, oh, I'll check in really quick and be like, yeah, I'm kind of stressed out, or like, wow, I'm really stressed out. So I can tell where I am from that one thing. And it's been helpful, a good, easy litmus test for me. So I want to really quickly, because if you're like me, you probably have a big disconnect between your mind and body. I want to reconnect you really quick. So if you want, you can close your eyes or turn up your camera or leave it on, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But I want you to go to a time when something stressful was happening recently, and think about kind of being really back in that moment, and nothing traumatizing, something small. Like for me, I was listening to the Supreme Court and the Colorado ballot this morning, and it just sent me, straight into stress world. And I started paying attention to how I felt. So kind of get into whatever that moment is for you really quick. And let's kind of take a look at what's happening in your body when you think back on that moment of how it felt then. So some people in their head, they get a headache, maybe a lack of focus where things feel really chaotic and that's just a lot of noise. Some people will notice a clenched jaw. You might have a tight sensation in your throat. You'll commonly have kind of the sore neck. I see a lot of people at work always grabbing their neck. You might check in that moment where this happened for you. Like, how were your shoulders? Were they up around your ears? Are they there now? Another one is holding your breath. And I used to take deep breaths a lot audibly, and I had a friend call me out on it one time. I had never noticed that. And in a stressful moment, how is your posture? Are you kind of caved in, protecting yourself? Maybe you're the opposite. Maybe your stance is kind of big and aggressive. A chest that is really tight. Or it could be a stomach ache, like I used to have a lot. Or that sensation of butterflies when you start to get nervous. So you can turn your cameras back on, open your eyes, but that's kind of a way to connect. And I'd love to see in the chat, like, where did you feel it when you started thinking back to this moment where you were stressed? Or if you feel more comfortable, you can say it out loud.
I think we have a raised hand.
Oh, sorry, I can't see a lot. I'm a little bit. Beth says she's a shoulder, neck ache. Yeah, I see that. I always in the office, you see people doing this constantly. That's kind of part of it. Jaw clenching. Yeah, I have, I don't know if you all have night guards, but that was a good purchase. And then, yeah, I think Robert, you have your hand up. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah. I'm a 20-year music editor. I've been pretty much fortunate enough to be working consistently over the past quarter of a century in the guild. And all of a sudden, nowhere, I had really, really bad ringing in my ears after a mix. And I go to I went to urgent care because I couldn't. I was like, something came out of nowhere, and he was like, "Let me look at your teeth." And apparently, I've been grinding. This has been ground down to a straight line over 25 years of them hovering over my shoulder for another version, another version, another version, another version, another version. So I actually have the bottom of a bleaching tray
Yeah.
that I could use and nobody knows it, and I can talk. And if I catch myself, I catch myself scraping and grinding and scraping and grinding. It's on more than even at the night guard. I have a bleach,
Yeah.
so this has helped this, but the bigger picture is that when I'm starting a job, or if I start a new job, and here's my advice, is that at a certain point around COVID and all of this, I got to a point where I thought, there is no way I am going to let this industry hurt me anymore physically, whether it's my ears, my head, my sleep, my this, my that, blah, 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 blah. And I've noticed that the more I assert myself in that regard, the better the job is, and I end up working less overtime and working less anyway. You know, at 6:30, I just leave. I stop, and I watched a mixer do that. 6:30, whether the room is full or not, I catch a train, bye, click, leaves. No overtime, bye. And when overtime's not approved, get up and leave.
Yeah, Robert, I think that's a really good point, is having boundaries, and
Yeah.
then also being able to, it's to the point of kind of checking in, is to like, what are these symptoms, and are they stress related, or are they something else? So I think that's a really good observation. I'm glad you brought it up. And actually, Shawn is going to do several kind of things that we can all do that are along the lines of the simple one that I had. I know there's a few other people who have wrote, like fill it in the throat. The shallow breathing is a big one. And I think there's a couple of others, but I'm going to see, go to the next. Okay.
The moral of the story is to not let me hurt myself.
Yeah.
Because of this episode of something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's definitely not
put it away at the end of the day, and that's okay.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that out loud and sharing kind of what's happening to you, because obviously the tinnitus and things, it all ties in.
Including the all-night work emails that don't need to happen.
Yeah.
Or be addressed.
Yeah.
On private time. Ever.
Yeah, I think the boundaries are a big one for the industry. How, a quick question, kind of a quick poll that you can put in the chat, is how do you deal with stress and anxiety? And I know a lot of people deal with, exercise is great, maybe creative activities. A lot of people drink or smoke or do something like that. Socializing with friends and family. Maybe you're a big nature person, so it's like, I got to get out and walk. So we're kind of curious. Looks like exercise, cooking, that's a good one. Singing, I love that. William, it's okay. We've all been drinking. Yoga is a good one. Creative, love it. Oh, I like all the singing. Reading, these are great. So next, Shawn is going to go into these practical strategies of what we can do.
Yes, and so when we think about these strategies, and I know I'll be mindful of time, I can turn into a human bulletin board rabbit hole. So keep me in time check if I get too far down the road with one of these. But what we want to focus on today, there's two types of strategies overall when we're dealing with uncertainty and such, and that's the problem focused and the emotion focused. So the problem focus is how do we change the situation itself, and the emotion focus is really centered more on how do we change our relationship with the situation or the uncertainty. And so these strategies are really going to focus on the emotion focus. How do we change our relationship and therefore our subjective well-being around that? So jumping in, Gosh, do you ever look at a slide and you're like, I really need to make sure I give context to this slide? Because if somebody just got it on their own, they would be like, what kind of science is going on here? But first off, I want to talk about box breathing. And so you may have heard this term before. Actually, the Navy SEALs use it, and it helps them with clarity and stress management. And the idea, we know that breathing is a very popular and very effective strategy in dealing with an activation or a stress response in our nervous system. And so box breathing is simply you breathe in, inhale for a count of 4. You would hold for a count of 4. You would exhale for a count of 4, and then hold for a count of 4. And then you would repeat that process multiple times. Typically, we'd recommend for at least 2 to 5 minutes. Again, certain, like with the Navy SEALs, they will practice it for 10, 20 upwards. So, but what we know is that it slows our breathing down, which then impacts our heart rate. It impacts our blood pressure and other mechanisms of our nervous system. So that's a great one to do. One I'll throw in between before we get to the next one, because it also changes our chemistry, body chemistry very quickly, is a type of dive response. So when we think about temperature, it works very effectively in changing body chemistry. And so that might be holding a piece of ice, something very cold. Don't give yourself, a bit of freezer burn or such, but holding a piece of ice, or even submerging your face in a like if you were to fill the sink full of some really cold water or ice water, and briefly submerging your face in there will also disrupt some of that activation response.
I love that one, but not on my face.
Not on your face.
Hands.
Yeah. So hands, feet, just somewhere where it really one, it's accessible to do that, but two, what feels most appropriate for each of you, because these are not universal. They definitely work individualized. So and I see here it does work on hands, absolutely. The self-hug. So there's a lot of research into self-compassion, the idea of how do we contain responses. And so the self-hug, what we do know is oxytocin is the bonding hormone. We know that it's produced with birth. So mother-child birth. We know that it's produced during sex. We know that it's produced in simple hugging or everyday hugging from friends and family support systems. And so you can do that for yourself, a form of self-soothing. And it's literally, grabbing one arm, as the graphic indicates, underneath and the other, and just, you might pair it with an affirmation. I'm okay, I'll be okay, or some other visual stimuli that we might have internally. Again, these are great. You might find it more appropriate not to do in the middle of Target or somewhere where people might give you a side eye, but it's an effective strategy. And then this last one's interesting. So touching wood. So where there's been more research recently is into the effects of natural elements in our environment. So there's been studies in like work environments or professional environments, and looking at metals, looking at marble, and looking at wood, and how that interrelates with our psychological well-being. There's a lot of empirical evidence around it. The studies, they are on the smaller sample size, but there's more and more coming out, and they're saying either through olfactory, through our sense of smell, or through our sense of touch. So touching wood-based elements with the palm of our hand for a period of time, they are discovering activates some of the parasympathetic nervous system. So our antidote to the fight or flight, and can help with that. Mindfulness strategies. So again, the progressive muscle relaxation, that could be something where if you have, these are strategies that don't take 10, 20 minutes. So they're easily accessible for many, but to take a few minutes, and people may start either top down or feet up. And it's about tensing particular muscle groups. So we might, example, while we're talking, you might just notice like tensing your toes, and tensing them for 5 seconds, full tension, and then just releasing for around 10 seconds, just letting them fully relax. and then doing that exercise again, tensing and releasing for a total of about 3 times, and just working our way up the body or down the body, depending on which direction that you might prefer to head. I'm going through these quickly, so absolutely we're going to have an opportunity at the end so that you can reach out and contact us, where we can send you a 1-pager or a recap of some of these strategies. So if we're missing anything or it seems like we're going a bit quickly, we'll definitely circle back. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's especially in the moment when we might be feeling overwhelmed, it's a great way to center ourselves, and it's using our senses. So think about 5 things that you see in the room or the space around you, 4 things that you can touch. So that might be the fabric that you're wearing, the chair that you're in, the carpet or flooring, pillows, etc. 3 things that you might hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And so again, a lot of science out there is an effective way to center ourselves in the moment. Now, what we're looking to do is, we talked about the stress levels earlier. We might be at a 7, an 8, a 9. We know with these strategies, they're going to lower. Now, it may not take us from a 7 to a 2, but if it can take us from a 7 to a 5 or 7 to a 4, that's going to allow us to relate to the stress and uncertainty a lot differently than if we're maintaining at that 7, 8, 9 level. Glimmers. So an interesting word here. We're hearing a lot about, let me pause and get the chat here. Yes, I love 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 a lot. Keeps the sanity there. Absolutely. I skipped this one. Please consider the Audible book. Start where you are. Excellent. So I will add that to the list. Kim, it sounds like you're familiar with it as well. Cool. Okay, so glimmers. Yes, we hear a lot of the word triggers, and we know that we're hardwired for a negativity bias, and triggers typically carry with it negative emotion or experiences. Glimmers they're different. They are actually what help us feel safe and connected. We were talking about that state of our nervous system earlier today, and this safe and connected. So the idea about glimmers is to notice in the world around you, what are those moments, what are those micro moments or micro events that allow us to feel that. And I think our next slide throws it out there as far as what everyone might feel their glimmers are. So I think we'll open it to the chat again, and if people want to put in maybe what some of their glimmers are, some of those micro moments that help them feel safe and connected. Thunderstorms, the ionization or the smell of rain, right before it's about to rain. Music, good concerts, favorite movies, interactions with pets, absolutely.
I love that, Beth.
Food, snowfall, cuddling with cats, yes. Sunsets, birds chirping, family, absolutely. Hot baths. So the ask here is that you keep a log, that ambient music, that you keep a log, and so you have a running list that when we might feel, we want to be in contact with these on a daily basis, because they help recharge us. That is a form of self-care. And so to keep a log of them and to allow yourselves exposure to those glimmers as often as you can in order to recharge and calm the nervous system. And then cognitive strategies. So simplicity here. There's a lot of choice in this world, and we know about the paradox of choice, that when we are presented with many choices, it can actually paralyze us from making a choice. Historically, they've done a lot of research around it, like consumer behavior and purchasing. They've also done research into online dating. And what does that mean when we're presented with a lot of choices? Or what does that mean with job search when we might have a lot of choices or options out there? And so in thinking about when we're in these places of uncertainty and there might be a lot of places to turn or a lot of decisions to make, how can we reduce those decisions down? Often associated with this is like the power of 3. You might hear it with location, 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 but it shows up in many realms. And the idea here is, and they've done research, especially in the military, a lot of research around what is it like to simplify things into three either options, commands, choices, so that people feel that they can make the choices necessary for them. Diffusion. So this is a whole classification of strategies where we're just in touch with knowing that thoughts don't define us, or thoughts are not facts. So I'm going to borrow another metaphor analogy and talk about being in a movie theater. So if I were to say to myself, I am anxious, it's like I'm an actor in that movie. If I were to be able to say to myself, I'm having the feeling that I'm anxious, then it's taking me as a actor in that movie to someone observing in the front row of the theater. And then if I were to say, I'm noticing that I'm having the feeling that I'm anxious, it's now moved us into the back row of the theater. Now, we're not going to be perfect as we try these the first handful times. But the idea is, as you can see, it's distancing ourselves, giving ourselves some space from whatever thought or feeling that we're having in the moment to be able to observe that. Another popular strategy is to just acknowledge and say, okay, I'm having the feeling that I'm anxious. Thank you, mind. Or I'm having the thought that, I won't be able to bounce back after this move. Thank you, mind. Just to be able to label those thoughts. That's an anxious thought, or that's a catastrophizing thought. We typically, in places of uncertainty, do a lot of catastrophizing or awfulizing. This is going to be the worst situation ever. I'll never, a lot of absolute words, always, never come up in those phrases. And then confronting limiting beliefs. So limiting beliefs are really these internalized statements. They often show up in childhood or adolescence, but they're statements that just we pick up, we hear, we adopt, and they become lenses that we see the world through. So there's some popular limiting beliefs on this next slide to kind of give context here. So as you might see, I'm not lovable, or to be lovable, I must always agree. I don't fit in. I'm not capable. I'll never do it right. Life is hard. So the ask here is to think about what limiting beliefs might show up for each of us. And these, as they are lenses through the world, may prevent us from taking opportunities, prevent us from taking action. And so first, we bring those into awareness. And then second, we start to think about what are alternative ways to believe. So if I had a statement that said, I don't fit in, well, we know if I were to say, okay, that's a limiting belief, I'm going to switch it. I fit in. Well, that's going to be too great of a leap for our mind to easily adopt. So what we typically do is a graduated process where it's like, I don't fit in. Okay, you know what? I fit in these types of situations, or ways that we can actually believe, no, the alternate is true. And then we move closer to a healthier belief about it, but just understanding where those limiting beliefs show up. And then strengthening personal agency on an ongoing basis, making sure that we're compassionate with ourselves. Our self-critical voice can be very loud, and we want to make sure that we're nurturing and fostering self-compassion. We want to be able to increase trust with self, the idea that I will be okay. If we have a strong belief in that, or I have the tools within me to figure out the next step, it will absolutely have us feel more empowered in a sense of uncertainty. Being aware of gossiping and venting, this can be a way to connect, to create community, or to normalize I'm not alone. We just have to be careful about how much we're taking in around that. When does it become unhealthy for us or unproductive? And what point does that look like? And then connecting with hope. And the idea of like, when there is a lot of uncertainty, what does hope look like? And we could do another several hour session on the idea of hope. What does it look like? How does it manifest? But I did want to include on the next slide just a quick 3 key ingredients when we think about hope. So the first ingredient would be a goal, making sure that we set a goal for ourselves. The second ingredient would be desire. So do I have a desire to achieve or ascertain that goal? What gets in the way of having that desire? And then the third really important one is possibility. Now, possibility may just be, it could be a shred of possibility. But the idea, if we think that there is any possibility that we can reach or achieve that goal, it will nurture, it will foster hope. And so just when you think about your own relationship with hope, think about how those 3 ingredients might be showing up for you. And is there a way to bolster or give some TLC to one of those ingredients? I think, yeah, we'll switch it back to Kim.
Thanks, Shawn. So, which of the strategies did you most identify with? And you can put this in the chat. So there's the grounding, which is kind of the box breathing, the hugging. Are you more of a mindfulness person, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and glimmers? Or are you more cognitive? So kind of limiting your choices to stop from being, or to avoid from being overwhelmed, or thinking your mind is one of the other ones that Shawn suggested. So I was curious if people had are using these. And I know the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 has already come up. So Rebecca's mindfulness, grounding, cognitive. We got all 3 right there in the first. Seeing a lot of grounding. And then Will likes the simplifying. Yeah, so you can see everybody identifies and is kind of appreciates a different method depending on what their situation is and kind of how they react to it.
And we have a raised hand as well, Kim.
Oh, great. I see it. Hi, Allison.
Hi. I did cognitive behavioral therapy for a little over a year. So a lot of this is resonating with me, and I can affirm it's very helpful. I wanted to share something that an activity that I return to a lot and that I learned. And it's just a chart that my therapist, I pulled it up to look at. But it was an activity I did every day for a week and just kind of filled out in a chart, and it's called GRAPES. That's the acronym. And so G is gentle with self, just kind of reminding yourself, you're doing the best you can with what you have. R is relaxation, just for like 5 minutes, something you like to do. Accomplishment, kind of like a reasonable, doable accomplishment. P is pleasure, just another 5 minutes, something you like. E is exercise, also purposeful movement. So a lot of times I would just do like stretching, walking. And S is social, just a tiny bit more than what you would normally do. Also could just be like going to get a coffee and interacting with people and just being around people. So grapes is something I return to a lot if I'm feeling stuck, and just kind of rate it every day and see if your mood improves as you do grapes.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I haven't heard that one before. That's awesome.
Thanks.
I think that's it's helpful. And I know and trust me, I already told you guys earlier, I just ignored everything forever on how my body was feeling. But these things really do work. And as long as you're doing them consistently over time, and Shawn's given a lot of ideas, and Allison, I'm sure everybody has different things that they do that's helpful, but I would really encourage people to try them out. It only takes a couple of minutes throughout the day. I have, and Shawn will appreciate this. My aunt has a happy bell. It goes off every hour. It's just a bell. And anytime I hear this certain phone or this certain tone, it just makes me smile, because I think happy bell. And so I instituted my own happy bell, which now I have one. And it reminds me to kind of take a temperature check, like, how am I? How do I feel? Like, how am I doing? And it makes me smile because it makes me think of her. So I definitely encourage people to check these things out. And because there's a lot of stress, as we already heard, in the industry, and it's hard to have boundaries, and it's hard, it can be a big pressure cooker. And with all the things that have been going on the last few years, from COVID to strikes to maybe more strikes, be gentle with yourselves. And as we close up, here's my shameless plug about the trash pickup and for the sustainability committee. You can see Will smiling because he's a co-chair. Yes, that's right. So one way to relax, as Shawn has said, is to be out in nature and touch wood. And there will be a million trees in this park that you can go give a big hug to. You can hit 2 in 1, the hug and the wood. So we encourage people to come out and check this out. We do it on Saturdays, the second Saturday of every month. This one will be this coming Saturday, 11 to 1. We're pretty much rain or shine. We have not canceled one to date. So come out, and it's going to be in Queens, our first time to head out there. So you can just do a quick snap of the QR code and sign up for that. And we have a lot of different programs as well. And then for Ethos, before we go into the Q&A, here's another one that you can grab. I am offering a complimentary coaching session to people if they want to check it out and just kind of see how it works for them. We, as Shawn had said earlier, have a one sheet so we can send information and these techniques if some of them look interesting for you or maybe your coworkers or family. We have more events coming up, a really fun one that we do on saboteurs and kind of how you sabotage yourself, and assessments, which are great. And then survey, you can leave a review of kind of what you thought about this, and ask any follow-up questions, because maybe you don't feel comfortable in the Q&A we're about to do, and you'd rather just send it off, and we'd be happy to answer that and get it back to you. And so now we'll go to the Q&A. So I will stop sharing. Oh, I can see everybody. Nice.
I thought something interesting to point out was when I took some meditation lessons, and a common obstacle that people would say to doing meditation would be like, I don't have time. I can't sit there for that long. I'm too busy. This is not my thing. And the joke was kind of, well, it's the people who are saying that who definitely have to meditate.
Yeah. Yeah, there's kind of a Buddhist quote that always makes me laugh, that they'll say is like, if you don't have 20 minutes to meditate, then you need an hour. Which is very true. Are there any other questions, or anybody wants to share something that they use or something that works for them? I see Brian. Hey, Brian. Says, what about using emotions and feelings charts? Yeah, Shawn could definitely speak to that.
Absolutely. It's so important that we are able to name and label what we're actually feeling. Part of where we can get into a thought spiral is, am I really feeling fear? Am I feeling anger? What is it? Absolutely, those charts to help you discern what are you feeling and what is the activating event, or what is going on that might be eliciting that feeling with any of these strategies, because these are not one size fits all. What I definitely want to make sure to share is practice. I'm very guilty of, give me a one-sheeter, I'll put it over here, and then when something comes up in the moment, sure, then I'll revisit that. But for these strategies to be really effective, we want to put them into practice. Like with the grapes chart, that's such a great way to make that a daily practice of, let me make sure I'm highlighting doing the self-care. So whichever techniques you find most useful, making sure that you do those as often as you can.
And does anybody else? Oh, here we've got one. CG, hello. You've tried bilateral movements with pastels. Oh, it just jumped up. Sorry. Oh yeah, so you can basically arts and using crayons and pencils. I think there's a lot of people who love that. Did you have something else to add to it?
Yeah, it's where you use both hands at the same time. So you put a pastel on each hand, and then you You can start out doing the same movement with each side of your body or alternate, because it puts you in touch with your body in a different way. Musicians are used to this when they play piano, but because most people don't draw using two hands, it makes us process things differently, and it can help soothe like tension and difficult emotions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know, Shawn, if you have any more on that, the science behind using both hands and movement.
The bilateral stimulation, absolutely. There's a lot of research coming out. Methods like tapping, even some with EMDR that we might see out there. So there's a lot of evidence behind it and its effectiveness.
Oh, maybe you can speak to an app that Veronica put in, How We Feel.
You know, I'm not. There's so many apps out there. I'm not familiar with that one, but I love any app that can say it can kind of help us discern what we're feeling and giving some understanding about it. So I'd say that's a win.
Oh yeah, I love William. Is taking a nap a valid way to deal with decreasing stress? Found myself getting very tired more often lately, and I'm not sure I'm more tired due to stress. I love naps, but Shawn, I think you can speak more on the scientific side besides for they're just awesome.
Naps are great. The idea with any of these strategies, it often comes up about if someone says that they are withdrawing, and we have a conversation around, you know, when we might withdraw or like when we might nap, do we use that as an activity that recharges us? Do we wake up after that nap and we might be able to approach the situation differently, you know, different perspective or different energy level? Or do we find that we're still in that drained, exhausted space? And the same idea with like withdrawing. If typically we might be more social and we're withdrawing, is that something that we're doing to recharge, or is that something that feels more like isolation to avoid a situation or a stressor? So I think it's really understanding for yourself, you know, how are you utilizing that mechanism? But we do know naps help with longevity. So I tend to lean towards a win on that.
And I see that Chris had put in the video, or wait, actually one more. A short guided meditation can be a good intro practice. Yeah, Greg, that's a good point. When I was at Streamline Media, and actually back in the day with Chris Peterson at Post Factory, we had a casting director who'd walk through with a lit incense, and everybody knew when they smelled that smell, it was time to go meditate. And we did transcendental meditation for 20 minutes as a group. And my favorite was one day, all of us sitting in a room in the dark, and the door opens and someone peeks their head in, and they just see all these people sitting there with their eyes closed, and they looked, and then they just slowly shut the door and walked off. And I don't think they knew that we had a meditation group. So they were like, wow, that edit bay, some strange folks sitting in there doing something weird. But so yeah, if you can get it going at work, even if it's online, it's still a lot of fun to get your groups together and do it. Like it's an interesting, different kind of dynamic to it. But also amazing to do alone. You can do it throughout the day. There's a mind insight timer and a million different apps for that as well. Remember Chris? Transcendental meditation days?
I think I remember being asked if we were part of a cult.
Yeah, and Jessica put in like doing breathing exercises. Oh, wow. Jason was in a group that did planks together at noon at the Smithsonian Channel. Wow, good on you guys. Although I feel like that would be stressful for me. Robert, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah. No, we've talked. I had to go actually work, but I came back. So, and you're talking about sleep and naps and all of that. I noticed. I read somewhere that if you can't sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock, you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't sleep. Instead of trying to go back to sleep, get up and do something. Fold the laundry, put the dishes away. All of a sudden, you're back to bed. I found that works better than anything else. Just if you're up, there's a reason, so go do something.
Yep.
Open the mail, you know, one little errand. There's one less errand you have to deal with. You know what I mean? So
yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm sure that works pretty well for some people.
Just do something, you know, if you're up, you know, look out the window at the night sky, you know, something.
Yeah.
Rather than, argue with yourself about why am I not sleeping, and then you're up until the rest
Lay
of the
there
day.
forever, waiting it out. Well, I know we only have 1 minute left, and I just want to say, Shawn, I want to say thank you to everyone for attending and contributing, and we hope you got some great takeaways and practice doing this. And I know that Chris had put in the chat if people were interested in doing more of these. And there's an interesting one I put out there that maybe you guys would be interested in. That is, it's a saboteurs, and it's kind of the things that stop you from doing things in your mind. And it's nice because there's a quick assessment, and then we could come here and talk about what those are for different people and how they show up and how they stop you at work and kind of in everyday life. And Shawn, I don't know if you want to add anything before we wrap out.
Yeah, I thank you for letting me be part of this and sharing it. And as you said, this is an uncertain time. Uncertainty is one thing that we can't avoid, and so just how do we manage it?
Yep.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will see you next month.
Guys.